Merab Dvalishvili is the greatest bantamweight of all time and is higher on the GOAT list than Jon Jones. Now, to all the Jon Jones fans that are losing their crap right now, I'm gonna spend this video explaining to you why Merab is the greatest bantamweight of all time, but also why he's higher on the GOAT list than Jon Jones. Alright, so hear me out. With UFC 316 just ending, he absolutely destroyed Sean O'Malley and submitted him in the third round, which is kind of crazy because he's only ever had one other submission in his whole career. The fight before that, he beat Omar Nurmagomedov. I'm pulling a Joe Rogan here. He defeated Umar, the cousin of Khabib, right, who had beaten Corey Sandhagen before that, who was undefeated. He's also Russian, Dagestani, so there was a lot of hype behind him going into the Merab fight. Merab beat him 3-2, winning the last 3 rounds, and still full of energy, still yapping and, like, you know, just going crazy after the fight. So he kind of, I don't want to say completely dominated Umar, but the last 3 rounds were even close. And then the fight before that, he beat Sean O'Malley for the title, dominated him, like actually dominated him. The fight before that, he dominated Henry Cejudo, an Olympic gold medalist, destroys him in wrestling. And then the fight before that, he beat Jose Aldo, who at the time was making a name for himself in the bantamweight division, and he was getting to the title. But you gotta look at it like this. He had Jose Aldo, who is one of the greatest featherweights of all time, arguably second place right before Volk. You have Henry Cejudo, simultaneous double champ, Olympic gold medalist, beat TJ Dillashaw, beat Demetrius Johnson, right? Destroys Henry Cejudo. Now I know that Henry Cejudo is out of his prime, but he's still Henry Cejudo, right? So you can't take that away from him. And then you have Sean O'Malley, a defending champion, defended against Chito Vera, which I get it. Chito was, you know, not really the best fighter to defend against, but regardless, he beat a defending champion. Then he beats Umar, who, like I said, cousin of Khabib, was undefeated, who beat Corey Sandhagen before he got the title, right? Oh, I forgot to mention Peter Yan, former champion, also in his prime, destroyed Peter Yan, right? So you look at this vast amount of opponents he's been, the best of the best. So that automatically puts him, in my opinion, in the bantamweight. Just the sheer dominance of him beating the best of the best. And compared to Dominic Cruz, who lost, you know, his last couple fights before retired, and TJ Dillashaw, the whole EPO situation. Now, I'm not saying they weren't good fighters. They were the best of the best. But in terms of being the GOAT, it has to go to Merab. And I'm forgetting one more person, Aljamain Sterling. Yes, Aljamain Sterling had 3 title defenses, but his title defenses were kind of lackluster, and title defenses isn't everything when being the GOAT. You have to understand, being the greatest of all time means fighting the best. That doesn't, like, you can have 50,000 title defenses. If you're fighting against tomato cans, it doesn't mean nothing. It means fighting the best. So I say that because Aljamain Sterling, he won the title, and, you know, that awkward whole thing that happened to Peter Yan. So let's just eliminate that completely, because that's technically a loss to Peter Yan, but not really. Anyways, get rid of that. Defeats Peter Yan. Let's just say he won the belt for the first time with the second fight against Peter Yan. Wins the belt. Then he fights Henry Cejudo. Great fight against Henry Cejudo, but Henry Cejudo was a little bit out of his prime, and it was like a 5-round split decision win by Aljamain Sterling, right? Then he goes on to beat TJ Dillashaw, who only had 1 arm in fighting him. So he beats Peter Yan, Henry Cejudo, TJ Dillashaw. Merab he's beaten both Peter Yan and Henry Cejudo in a more dominant fashion than Aljamain. So what that pretty much means is not only has Merab beaten similar opponents to the former greats of the bantam division in a more dominant style, and every person he fought wasn't like severely injured or out of their prime, right? Except for maybe Henry Cejudo. So with all that being said, that automatically puts Merab as the greatest, right? Then the theme of this video comes in, like, what do you mean he's better than Jon Jones in the GOAT list? Let me explain to you, all right? We look at Jon Jones' career, and we look at the people he fought. His last fight was against Stipe Miocic. Stipe Miocic, 42 years old. Last time he fought before Jon Jones, he got knocked out by Francis Ngannou, out of his prime, was even fighting. He was a fighter. Like, that's a horrible win. And the thing is, Jon Jones was ducking Tom Aspinall to fight Stipe. So that automatically hinders his legacy. The fight before that, he fights Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane has horrible grappling, submits him in the first round. By the way, Ciryl Gane got the title shot in the first place by beating people like Taito Ivasa and Derek Lewis. And before that, he had lost to Francis Ngannou by Francis Ngannou just constantly taking him down. And Francis Ngannou had, I think, like, he had torn an ACL and some other thing in his leg. Basically, Ciryl Gane is a horrible grappler, and Jon Jones just submitted him first round like how any other fighter would have been able to. Point is, he defeats someone who has no striking. Then the fight before that, he loses to Dominic Reyes. Every person knows he lost to Dominic Reyes. Every human being on earth who watches fighting knows he lost to Dominic Reyes. There's no argument. It was 3-2, and that's why he left the light heavyweight division. That's why he avoided the rematch with Dominic Reyes, because he knew he was going to lose. By the way, before he even went up to the heavyweight division, he didn't fight for 3 years because he was just ducking Francis Ngannou, who was the champion at the time. And then, before the Dominic Reyes fight, you had Jon Jones versus Thiago Santos. By the way, Just want to say this. Taiji Santos was injured. Only one of his legs was actually working properly, and Jon Jones couldn't even take him out. For that, he took Anthony flipping Smith to a 5-round decision. How the flip do you take Anthony Smith to a 5-round decision when Khalil Rountree is knocking him out? Like, name one light heavyweight who hasn't knocked out Anthony Smith. And then after the Anthony Smith fight, the fight before that was the second Gustafsson fight. Alexander Gustafsson was out of his prime when he fought Jon Jones. He was coming off of multiple losses, so obviously he was gonna get TKO'd, right? But then the fight before that, he had this no contest like fight with DC. And you wanna know why it's a no contest on his record? Even though technically he beat Daniel Cormier, he was caught on steroids. He was cheating. He literally cheated in his fight against Daniel Cormier, which is ironic and hilarious because for UFC 200, remember how DC fought Anderson Silva for UFC 200? It's kind of a mismatch comparing the weight, right? Anderson Silva was a lot smaller than DC. But you wanna know why that happened? Because USADA caught Jon Jones on steroids, which caused the whole freaking shakeup with the UFC. They had to switch up the main event. They have to, scramble trying to figure out what to do. And that was all because Jon Jones was caught on steroids. So that automatically takes so much away from his legacy. Fighting, people were injured, people were out of their prime, taking Anthony Smith to a 5-round war, being caught on steroids, having a win taken away from him because he was on steroids, having UFC 200 have to change the whole main event because of him. And then that's not even one of the worst things he's done. You also had UFC 151. He had the whole event canceled, completely shut down because Jon Jones refused to fight Chael Sonnen on short notice because his opponent pulled out.
This is probably one of my all-time lows as being president of the UFC over the last 11 years. For the first time in 11 years, we're going to cancel an event.
Can you believe that? A whole UFC event canceled. Probably millions of dollars lost because of Jon Jones because he didn't want to fight Chael Sonnen. And God knows why Dana White still glazes this guy. And then I also didn't mention the fact that he fought Rampage Jackson who was out of his prime. Rampage's prime was in Pride. And when he fought Shogun Rua for a title, Shogun Rua was out of his prime, giving Jon Jones the opportunity to fight for his title, unlike what Jon is doing to Tom Aspinall. He also fought Lyoto Machida, who was a middleweight, a smaller hip middleweight, moving up to light heavyweight. He wasn't even the most dominant or the best middleweight at the time. So you have like all these factors, all these things that hinder his legacy, but the main thing that hinders his legacy is the steroid use. It's the fact that UFC events were canceled because of him. It's the fact that he hid under the UFC cage for 8 hours and USADA came to drug test him because he knew he was going to get caught and he knew it would cancel the event.
USADA rolls in to Jackson's gym to do a test on Jon Jones, and there was only some coaches in there and Jon. There was like 5 people there at the time, so he can see them coming. Where they parked, he can see them coming, so they don't know what to do with him. They hide him underneath the cage. Jon Jones hides under the cage. They tell Jon, we don't know where he is. And this is before we were enrolled in the program, and he did not need to disclose his whereabouts. At the same time, if they show up and find you, you must vandalize the situation. You must test. They can't find you. You didn't have to test back then. So anyway, he hides under the ring. They said, well, where is he? He's supposed to, this is his gym. They said, well, how would I know where he is? So instead of leaving like they thought they would do, they take a seat. Well, there's like 8 hours left in the business day. They don't ever leave. However long was 6 or 8 hour time frame, Jon's under the cage the entire time.
Had he never taken steroids and fought and beat DC, there'd be no doubt in DC's mind that he lost to a better man. But now that there's always going to be a doubt in his mind, like, could I have beaten him had he not been cheating and he not had been on steroids? So now let's compare both fighters, right? Merab and Jon Jones. I've stated some of their fights for both fighters, and we'll compare them. Let's go by the most recent fight. Merab's most recent fight was obviously Sean O'Malley with UFC 316. Jon Jones was Stipe Miocic. I don't remember the exact number of the event. Merab dominated Sean O'Malley, who was in his prime, who isn't 42 years old, who wasn't coming off of a 4-year layup, who in his last fight didn't get knocked out, right? And dominates him, submits him in the 3rd round. Now, with Jon Jones, you look at Stipe Miocic. I know Stipe Miocic is considered the greatest heavyweight of all time. And I also think he's the greatest of all time. But it's one thing to be the greatest of all time in your prime. It's a whole different thing to be greatest of all time when you're years out of your prime. You're coming off of a 4-year layoff, which your last fight you got knocked out viciously by the former champion. And you're a fighter who's not even focusing on fighting anymore. You take the fight before that, Suragan. Suragan has 0 grappling skills, who fought bums in the division, like ties on a 5-fight losing streak to get to the title in the first place. Jon Jones submits him in the 1st round. And then you look at Merab's second to last fight, he fought Omar. Omar had just beaten Corey Sandhagen and was entering his prime. If not, he's already in his prime. Beat Corey Sandhagen, who's fighting for the title soon. So it's crazy. And then the fight before that, Jon Jones lost to Dominic Reyes the fight before that. It's just that the judges robbed Dominic Reyes. Greatest robbery in UFC history is Dominic Reyes being robbed of the win against Jon Jones. But you look at Merab's 3rd to last fight, it was for the title. Sean O'Malley, who was a defending champion, and he demolishes Sean O'Malley. Freaking demolishes this guy. 5 rounds. Like, you can arguably maybe give 2, possibly out of the 5 rounds of Sean, but even then that's debatable. And then the fight before that, he fights Gustafsson. He does TKO Gustafsson, but Gustafsson was out of his prime, had coming off of a couple losses before fighting Jon Jones for the second time. The fight before that, Merab demolishes, who is a 2-time champion, holding 2 belts simultaneously, and also an Olympic gold medalist. I get it, Henry was out of his prime, but Gustafsson was also out of his prime, and Gustafsson was never a champion, so it's like, take the how you will. And then you go before that, Jones takes Anthony flipping Smith to a 5-round decision, split decision, or maybe it was unanimous. Point is, Anthony Smith, who every light heavyweight has knocked out. But then you go to Merab, who before Henry Cejudo, he destroys Peter Yan, a former defending champion who is on a resurgence right now, having 2 wins, and if he wins maybe 1 or 2 more fights, he's able to fight for the title. So it's like you compare the resumes of both fighters, and arguably Merab's last 5-6 fights are way better and more significant, and the way he beat his opponents in his last like 5-6 fights are way more dominant and just objectively better opponents that he's beaten than the opponents Jon Jones has beaten in the last 5-6 title defenses that he had. Now I know to all you people who are like, well, Jon Jones is a 2-time champion and he did defend his title like what, 11, 12 times. I get that, I'm aware, but I'm gonna counter that argument with this by saying this: title defenses doesn't mean anything. Like I said earlier in the video, you could have a million title defenses, but if you're fighting tomato cans, it means nothing. It's just the quality of opponents that you're fighting that really stands out on your resume. The steroid thing eliminates him from the greatest of all time automatically. Merab has never been once caught on steroids. There are the accusations of him being on EPO. He's been drug tested God knows how many times, and not once has been caught. So it's like, make it make sense, right? So that right there is my argument for why Merab is the greatest bantamweight of all time, but more importantly, he's higher on the GOAT list than Jon Jones.